In 1870, a 31-year-old bookkeeper from Cleveland controlled 4% of America's oil refining capacity. Just 10 years later, he controlled 90%. By 1904, a single company dominated 91% of oil production and 85% of all final sales in the United States. The man behind it was John D. Rockefeller. And the methods he invented, the corporate structures he pioneered, the tactics he perfected, they didn't disappear when the Supreme Court broke up Standard Oil in 1911. They evolved, they spread, they became the operating system for every dominant corporation that followed. The gasoline you pump into your car today comes from descendants of Standard Oil. The pharmaceutical companies that manufacture your medications use Rockefeller's playbook. The technology platforms that control what you see, what you buy, and how you communicate, they all learned from the same blueprint. Amazon uses it, Google uses it, Apple uses it. They all inherited the architecture that one man built 155 years ago. This isn't about ancient history. This is about understanding why you cannot escape the economic system that shapes your daily existence. Because the system isn't a company. The system is the method. And that method has been replicated, refined, and embedded into the very structure of corporate America, ever since a young man with a con artist father and a Baptist mother decided that competition itself was a sin. Let me show you exactly how Rockefeller built this machine, how he used it to become the richest person in modern history, how breaking up his company actually tripled his wealth, and why 114 years after that supposed defeat, you still live in the world he designed. Because once you see the pattern, you'll recognize it everywhere. John Davison Rockefeller was born on July 8, 1839 in Richford, New York. His father, William Avery Rockefeller, was a traveling salesman who sold fake cancer cures to desperate people. He would disappear for months at a time, eventually abandoning the family almost entirely while maintaining a second secret family under an assumed name. His mother, Eliza Davison, was a devout Baptist who instilled in her children an unwavering belief that hard work and moral certainty were the paths to righteousness. This combination, the con man's ruthlessness and the Baptist's absolute conviction, would define everything Rockefeller built. He would destroy thousands of competitors without hesitation, while genuinely believing that God had chosen him to bring order to chaos. This wasn't hypocrisy in his mind. This was divine purpose. Monopoly wasn't theft. It was the natural end state of efficient markets. Competition was waste. Consolidation was righteous. In 1859, the same year oil was discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania, the 19-year-old Rockefeller opened his first business, a commodities brokerage in Cleveland. He was methodical, obsessive about record-keeping, and pathologically focused on eliminating waste. By the time the Civil War ended, he had accumulated enough capital to see the opportunity that would change everything. The Pennsylvania oil rush had created chaos. Thousands of prospectors flooded into the region, drilling wildly, creating massive boom and bust cycles. Fortunes were made and lost overnight. Oil prices swung violently between 12 cents and $12 per barrel, sometimes within the same year. It was anarchy. And Rockefeller saw exactly where the real money was hiding. Not in drilling. Drilling was gambling. Too dependent on luck, too volatile, too risky. The real opportunity was in refining, turning that crude oil into kerosene for lamps. That's where you could control costs. That's where efficiency could be measured and optimized. That's where a meticulous bookkeeper could build an empire. In 1863, Rockefeller invested $4,000 in his first oil refinery in Cleveland. Within 2 years, it was the largest refinery in the city. But Cleveland had 30 competing refineries. Margins were thin. Most operators ran at the edge of bankruptcy. The industry was drowning in overcapacity, with refining capability 3 times larger than actual market demand. This is where Rockefeller's genius emerged. He didn't try to compete on price alone. He didn't try to outproduce his rivals. He set out to eliminate competition entirely, and he did it through a method that would become the foundation of corporate control for the next century and a half: vertical integration. Most refineries in the 1860s controlled exactly one step of the production chain. They bought crude oil from drillers, refined it into kerosene, and sold it to distributors. Each handoff created profit for someone else. Each transaction was a leak in the pipeline. Rockefeller decided to control every step himself. He bought the barrel-making factories so he didn't have to purchase barrels. While his competitors paid 25 cents per barrel, Rockefeller made his own for 15 cents. He bought tank cars and negotiated with railroads to ship his own oil. He secured his own warehouses for storage. He built his own distribution networks to sell directly to consumers. Every step that used to generate profit for someone else, Rockefeller brought in-house. This wasn't just about efficiency. This was about creating insurmountable advantages. While competitors had to negotiate with suppliers and pay market rates, Rockefeller controlled the entire supply chain. His costs dropped below anything his rivals could match. But vertical integration was only the foundation. The second phase was far more aggressive: horizontal consolidation. If vertical integration means controlling the supply chain, horizontal consolidation means buying or destroying every competitor until you're the only one left standing. In January 1870, Rockefeller incorporated the Standard Oil Company of Ohio with $1 million in capital. He chose the name Standard deliberately to signal reliable quality and consistent service, but the name also carried a darker implication. This would be the standard against which all others would be measured, and measured against Rockefeller's machine, they would all fall short. The railroads would double their shipping rates for everyone, but Standard Oil and a few allied refineries would receive secret rebates, paying far less than the public rate. Even more destructively, Standard Oil would receive drawbacks, payments for every barrel of oil that competitors shipped. The railroads would literally pay Rockefeller money every time his rivals moved product. Word of the scheme leaked in February 1872. The reaction in the Pennsylvania oil regions was explosive. 3,000 furious producers packed the Titusville Opera House, screaming denunciations of Rockefeller and Standard Oil. Mobs formed. Standard Oil signs were defaced with skulls and crossbones. Vigilantes attacked Standard Oil shipments and sabotaged Pennsylvania railroad tracks. Death threats flooded into Rockefeller's office. The South Improvement Company collapsed within weeks. The Pennsylvania legislature revoked its charter before it ever shipped a single barrel of oil. Rockefeller had suffered his first major public defeat. But here's what nobody understood at the time. While the outrage consumed public attention, Rockefeller was already executing his real plan. Between mid-February and late March of 1872, in just 6 weeks, he systematically approached every refinery owner in Cleveland with a simple proposition: sell to me. He offered to buy their refineries at fair market value, paying either cash or stock in Standard Oil. Those who agreed became partners in his expanding empire, often hired as managers of their former businesses. Those who refused faced the alternative. Standard Oil would launch a price war. Rockefeller could sell kerosene below cost indefinitely because his vertical integration made his actual production costs the lowest in the industry. His competitors, who couldn't produce as cheaply, would lose money on every sale until they either sold or went bankrupt. As one rival refiner later testified, "There was a pressure brought to bear upon my mind and upon almost all citizens of Cleveland engaged in the oil business to the effect that unless we went into the combination, we were virtually killed as refiners. If we did not sell out, we should be crushed out." Another refiner recalled Rockefeller's own words: "We have a combination with the railroads. We are going to buy out all the refiners in Cleveland. We will give everyone a chance to come in. Those who refuse will be crushed. If you don't sell your property to us, it will be valueless." Within 48 hours in early March 1872, Rockefeller bought 6 refineries. By the time the massacre ended, he had acquired 22 of Cleveland's 26 competing refineries. He went from controlling roughly 4% of American refining capacity to 25% in less than 2 months. This was the blueprint: offer to buy. If they refuse, destroy them economically. Then buy the ruins. And Rockefeller was just getting started. Through the 1870s, Standard Oil expanded across America: New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore. The same tactics everywhere. Secret railroad rebates that made shipping costs lower than competitors could match. Vertical integration that kept production costs below anyone else. And ruthless price wars that eliminated anyone who refused to sell. When competitors tried to build alternative pipeline networks to bypass Standard Oil's control, Rockefeller bought up land along their routes to block construction. When that didn't work, he bribed Pennsylvania legislators to obstruct permits. When independent refiners formed cooperatives to resist him, Standard Oil agents infiltrated their organizations, gathering intelligence on their plans. By 1879, Standard Oil controlled 90% of America's oil refining capacity. But 90% control created a new problem: monopolies this large attracted attention. State laws prohibited companies from owning stock in corporations based in other states. The patchwork of Standard Oil entities across dozens of jurisdictions was becoming legally unmanageable. So Rockefeller's lawyers invented something new. In January 1882, 41 shareholders signed the Standard Oil Trust Agreement. They conveyed their shares in approximately 40 different companies to 9 trustees, all Rockefeller associates. The trustees gained unified control over the entire enterprise, while each component company technically remained independent under its state charter. This was the first major corporate trust in American history. It created a new legal entity that didn't produce anything itself. It just owned and controlled other companies. The trust wasn't a business, it was a holding structure. The implications were revolutionary and terrifying. The trust made Standard Oil virtually impervious to investigation. As muckraking journalist Ida Tarbell would later write, "You could argue its existence from its effects, but you could not prove it." The legal structure was so complex, so distributed across jurisdictions, that regulators couldn't find a target to attack. And the structure became the template for every trust that followed. Sugar Trust, Tobacco Trust, Steel Trust. They all copied Rockefeller's innovation. The modern holding company, the parent corporation that owns subsidiaries, Berkshire Hathaway, Alphabet, Meta, Amazon, they're all descendants of what Rockefeller's lawyers invented in 1882. By 1904, Standard Oil controlled 91% of oil refining in America and 85% of final sales. Rockefeller was the wealthiest individual in the country, worth approximately $300 million, which translates to roughly $25 billion in today's money. But that figure massively understates his economic power. At his peak around 1913, his inflation-adjusted wealth exceeded $400 billion, more than Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates combined, the richest individual in modern history. And he built that wealth through the system: vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, legal structures that concentrated control while evading regulation, regulatory capture that turned government into a tool rather than an obstacle. But the public was turning against monopolies. In 1890, Congress passed the Sherman Antitrust Act, making combinations and restraint of trade illegal. In 1902, journalist Ida Tarbell began publishing her devastating exposé of Standard Oil in McClure's magazine. Her father had been an independent oil producer in Pennsylvania, whom Rockefeller's tactics had driven out of business. She spent years documenting every secret rebate, every predatory price war, every crushed competitor. Her work, eventually published as The History of the Standard Oil Company, transformed Rockefeller from a successful businessman into a national villain. Political cartoons depicted him as an octopus with tentacles wrapped around the Capitol, the railroads, and the banks. He became the most hated man in America. In 1906, the federal government filed suit against Standard Oil under the Sherman Antitrust Act. The case worked its way through the courts for 5 years. On May 15, 1911, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that Standard Oil was an illegal monopoly engaged in unreasonable restraint of trade. The justices ordered the trust dissolved into 34 independent companies. This should have been the end, the destruction of the system, the punishment for monopolistic excess. Instead, it was the beginning of something even more remarkable. Because when Standard Oil was broken up, Rockefeller still owned approximately 25% of the shares in all 34 resulting companies. Standard Oil of New Jersey became Exxon. Standard Oil of New York became Mobil. Standard Oil of California became Chevron. Standard Oil of Indiana became Amoco. Standard Oil of Ohio eventually merged with BP. Before the breakup, Standard Oil stock was worth approximately $600 per share. After the breakup, the combined value of all 34 successor companies exceeded $2,000 per share. Rockefeller's personal wealth didn't decrease. It tripled. His holdings went from roughly $300 million to $900 million within a few years. The dissolution had actually propelled his fortune to unprecedented heights. Why? Because the breakup forced each new company to compete, driving innovation and efficiency in ways the monopoly had suppressed. Because the automobile industry was just emerging, creating massive new demand for gasoline, a product Standard Oil had previously discarded as worthless waste. And because breaking one monopoly into 34 regional companies that still dominated their markets was not really breaking up the monopoly, it was just reorganizing it. And over the following decades, the pieces quietly reassembled. Exxon and Mobil merged in 1999. Chevron absorbed Gulf Oil and Standard Oil of Kentucky. BP acquired Amoco and Standard Oil of Ohio. The Standard Oil monopoly that was supposedly destroyed in 1911 has essentially reconsolidated into Exxon, Mobil, Chevron, and BP. The system broke itself up to avoid regulation, then spent a century putting itself back together. But even the oil empire isn't Rockefeller's most enduring legacy. In 1913, the same year his wealth peaked, Rockefeller established the Rockefeller Foundation with an initial endowment of $100 million, equivalent to roughly $7 billion today. It was the largest philanthropic foundation the world had ever seen. On the surface, this was charity, Rockefeller giving back after decades of accumulation, redemption for the robber baron. Look deeper. The foundation allowed Rockefeller to avoid estate taxes that would otherwise have claimed enormous portions of his wealth. It gave him and his family perpetual control over which institutions received funding, which meant influence over what was taught, what was researched, what became accepted knowledge. The Rockefeller Foundation funded the creation of modern American medical education. It established the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health and the Harvard School of Public Health. It funded Rockefeller University for medical research. It provided grants that shaped curricula at dozens of major universities. The foundation didn't just give money. It shaped the structure of American medicine to emphasize pharmaceutical interventions and hospital-based care over alternative approaches. And pharmaceutical companies, many of them descended from Standard Oil's chemical divisions, profited enormously from this structure for generations. Today, the Rockefeller Foundation has assets exceeding $6 billion. It continues to fund global health initiatives, influence policy discussions, and shape research priorities. The foundation pledged in 2020 to divest from fossil fuels, notable given that its entire endowment originated from Standard Oil wealth. But here's the pattern that matters most. Every modern billionaire philanthropist follows the Rockefeller template. Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation, with $75 billion in assets, funding global health while shaping WHO policy. Mark Zuckerberg and the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Warren Buffett pledging his fortune to the Gates Foundation, Mackenzie Scott distributing billions through charitable giving. These aren't just charity, they're tax optimization, legacy building, policy influence, the conversion of private wealth into institutional power that persists across generations. Rockefeller invented this model. Modern billionaires perfected it. The Rockefeller family remains influential to this day. David Rockefeller, John D., his grandson, was chairman of Chase Manhattan Bank and one of the most powerful figures in global finance for 50 years, until his death in 2017 at age 101. The family's combined wealth, spread across hundreds of trusts and foundations, is estimated at $11 billion. They still shape policy. They still fund research. They still influence outcomes 150 years after John D. started his first refinery. Now let me show you how the system operates today. In August 2024, a federal judge ruled that Google maintains an illegal monopoly in online search. The company controls approximately 90% of the search engine market, a dominance that exceeds Standard Oil's peak of 91%. But Google doesn't charge users money. It charges them data. And data, in the modern economy, is more valuable than oil ever was. Google paid Apple $26 billion in a single year to remain the default search engine on iPhones. This is the modern version of railroad rebates, not secret kickbacks for shipping oil, but massive payments to ensure distribution dominance. Amazon uses vertical integration exactly like Rockefeller taught. The company started as an online bookstore. Now it owns the warehouses, the logistics network, the delivery trucks, the payment processing systems, the cloud infrastructure that hosts its competitors' websites. Amazon Web Services generates $90 billion in annual revenue, more than Amazon's retail profits. Amazon also practices horizontal consolidation. It has acquired over 100 companies, including Whole Foods, Zappos, Twitch, Ring, and MGM Studios. When it can't acquire a competitor, it copies their products, using sales data from its own marketplace to identify successful items, then creates Amazon Basics versions and promotes them above the originals. The Federal Trade Commission filed suit against Amazon in 2023, alleging the company uses interlocking anti-competitive tactics, including punishing sellers for offering lower prices elsewhere and degrading search results to prioritize its own products. The trial is scheduled for 2026. Apple faces similar charges. The Department of Justice alleges the company illegally maintains a smartphone monopoly by degrading functionality for non-Apple products, limiting third-party services, and trapping users in an ecosystem designed to prevent switching. Meta owns 3 of the world's largest social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. The FTC alleges this represents illegal horizontal consolidation achieved through acquiring potential competitors. In April 2025, a federal judge ruled that Google also maintains an illegal monopoly in online advertising, the second antitrust defeat for the company within a year. These cases represent the most significant antitrust enforcement against major corporations in decades. They use the same legal framework, the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, that was deployed against Standard Oil. The comparisons between Rockefeller's tactics and modern tech monopolies appear throughout the legal arguments and judicial opinions, but here's what the cases don't address. The structure Rockefeller created is now embedded in how corporations operate at every level: the holding company model, the vertical integration that controls supply chains, the horizontal consolidation that eliminates competitors, the regulatory capture that shapes rules in favor of incumbents, the philanthropic influence that buys legitimacy while avoiding taxes. You cannot escape this system because you cannot function in modern society without participating in it. Need to buy products? Amazon controls nearly 40% of American e-commerce. Its competitors must match its logistics scale or die. Need internet search? Google has 90% market share. Alternatives exist, but the network effects that make Google useful compound over time. Need social connection? Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp are all owned by Meta. You're not choosing between platforms. You're choosing which Meta property to use. Need transportation? The gasoline you purchase comes from ExxonMobil, Chevron, or BP, all descendants of Standard Oil or companies using its methods. Need healthcare? The pharmaceuticals you take were developed through systems shaped by Rockefeller Foundation grants. The medical schools that trained your doctors were funded by Rockefeller money. The research priorities that determined what diseases got attention and what treatments got developed were influenced by Rockefeller institutions for over a century. Need to save for retirement? The index funds and mutual funds that hold your pension assets are managed by BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, institutions that use Rockefeller's holding company structures. Your retirement depends on the continued profitability of the very corporations you cannot escape. The average American spends thousands of dollars per year on gasoline, thousands more on products purchased through Amazon's platform, thousands on healthcare beyond insurance coverage, thousands on internet services and technology. Over a lifetime, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing to corporations using tactics perfected 150 years ago. And you cannot opt out. You could refuse to buy gasoline, but you need transportation to work. You could refuse Amazon, but competitive pricing and convenience make alternatives nearly impossible for most consumers. You could refuse Google, but with 90% market share, what alternative offers comparable functionality? You could refuse pharmaceutical medicine, but medical licensing, insurance coverage, and cultural acceptance are all products of systems Rockefeller's institutions shaped. This is his ultimate achievement. Not that he became the richest man in history, that he built a system where every path leads back to consolidated corporate control, where competition is crushed before it threatens dominant players, where regulators protect incumbents rather than consumers, where philanthropy buys influence while perpetuating the structures that concentrate wealth. Rockefeller understood something that most people miss even today. The system isn't evil, it's efficient. Vertical integration reduces costs. Horizontal consolidation eliminates wasteful duplication. Regulatory capture provides stability. Foundations fund genuine research and public health improvements. Standard Oil made kerosene affordable for ordinary Americans. Before Standard Oil dominated the market, kerosene cost 58 cents per gallon. After Standard Oil's efficiencies were implemented, 8 cents per gallon. An 86% price reduction that brought light to homes that had previously relied on expensive candles. Amazon delivers products in 2 days. Google answers questions in milliseconds. Modern medicine extends lifespans by decades. The system delivers value. The problem isn't that it doesn't work. The problem is that it concentrates wealth at the top while delivering efficiency at the bottom. You get cheap gasoline, fast shipping, instant information, and effective medicine. The heirs to Rockefeller's methods accumulate trillions in wealth. Both things are simultaneously true. John D. Rockefeller died on May 23, 1937, at age 97. He had wanted to live to 100. He missed his goal by less than 3 years. By the time he died, he had given away more than $500 million, making him one of the most generous philanthropists in history. He had also built a system that would outlive him by centuries. The companies that emerged from Standard Oil remain among the largest and most profitable on Earth. The foundation he created continues to shape global policy. The corporate structures he invented define how business operates worldwide. And the methods he pioneered, vertical integration, horizontal consolidation, the trust structure, regulatory capture, philanthropic influence, they've been adopted by every dominant corporation in every major industry. Competition is a sin, Rockefeller once said. Most people hear that as greed, but Rockefeller meant it as theology. Competition is wasteful, it duplicates effort, it destroys capital. Consolidation is righteous, it creates efficiency. It serves consumers through lower prices. Monopoly isn't theft, it's the natural end state of markets pursuing efficiency. This was his worldview, and he built a system to enforce it. 155 years later, we live in that system. 3 to 5 dominant players control nearly every major industry. The barriers to entry get higher each year. The consolidation continues. The methods are eternal because they work. You cannot escape the Rockefeller system, but now you can see it, and seeing it changes everything. If this revealed the architecture that controls your economic life, if you understand now that the corporate structures shaping your daily existence were built by one man over a century ago and have only grown more powerful since, then subscribe. Because understanding how the machine works is the first step toward navigating it. The system isn't going anywhere, but at least now you know who designed it and why escape was never part of the blueprint.